Well, here we are. We made it to the end of January, to the last John Wick movie, and this one is a pretty good one to go out on. John Wick Chapter 4. Now, John Wick 4 is the fourth John Wick movie and hopefully the last John Wick movie. I know we're getting a spin-off called The Ballerina that's in the same universe, and the Continental is getting its own show. But for me, this feels like the most proper conclusion that the John Wick franchise could have. It's the fulfillment of John Wick's character arc from the past three movies. It's definitely the biggest and most ambitious one. Again, these John Wick movies, they keep stepping it up every movie. And this one, it's about 3 hours long, and there are plenty of very intense and exciting action sequences. But throughout the whole movie, there's this tone of finality to it. Even if you don't know how the movie ends, which, first off, spoiler alert, I'm going to be spoiling the entire movie, so if you don't know how it ends or what it's all building to, I'm sorry, but you were warned. And this movie starts off in true John Wick fashion right after the last movie. At the end of the last movie, John Wick got shot off a balcony and struggled all the way to the Bowery King, who has been recuperating him ever since. And here we see him training, getting ready to actually do something about what's been done to him. He just got betrayed by the High Table, people he thought he trusted, and now he's on a mission. So through a very Lawrence of Arabia-like transition, we are in the desert. John Wick is on horseback, and he is going after the Elder. A different Elder this time. He's no longer the dude from Wonder Woman. I guess during the meantime, that Elder had died, and this guy replaced him. And now John wants his ring back. You know, the finger that he cut off to serve the High Table? Yeah, he wants that wedding band back. And when he discovers that the ring is long gone, nobody knows where it is, it must have gotten lost, he shoots the Elder, the person above the table. He shoots him dead in the face, killing him, and this sets the tone for the rest of the movie, because now John is not playing around. He's not trying to get back into the good graces of the High Table. He's not looking to survive. He's looking to just kill them all. They've given him too much grief. He's done with the whole thing. He just wants the High Table to end. But naturally, the High Table is not going to let that happen. So what they've done is they've let Bill Skarsgård's Marquis off his leash. The Marquis now has total power, total authority over everybody to hunt down and exterminate John Wick, any methods necessary. Whether it breaks the rules or not, he doesn't care. He's been given carte blanche, deal with the problem however you have to do before more High Table people die. And the Marquis takes this not just as, oh, I have to destroy John Wick, I have to destroy the idea of John Wick. Anybody touched with this freedom-loving nonconformist must also be punished. So he goes to the Continental and meets up with Winston and Kayron, and he delivers them some more bad news. Unfortunately, the Manhattan Continental needs to be destroyed. It's been contaminated with the ideas of John Wick, so yeah, that's the first thing to go. And since the Continental's no longer there, he doesn't need a concierge. So unfortunately, Lance Reddick's character, Kayron, which I'm just not realizing, I don't think his name is actually pronounced Kayron. Kayron is like the passenger to the underworld in Greek mythology, but I think he's pronounced Charon. At least that's how Winston pronounces it in this movie. I'm so sorry if I've been mispronouncing his name during the entire series. He's a great character. Very sad to see him go in this one, and also very sad to see him go in real life. Unfortunately, Lance Reddick did pass away shortly after filming this movie, and in the credits there's a very sweet dedication to Lance Reddick because he really does make the world feel consistent, unified. Just his presence as the concierge, it just works, and it's so sad to see him go because now you know that the rules have completely changed. Everything is upset. Everybody's doing what they think is best, which means a lot of people are probably gonna die. And they do. And the first real taste of that we get is at the Continental in Japan. John Wick is seeking refuge there because he knows the manager. They go way back, and the manager there is Hiroyuki Sadana. I think I'm pronouncing that right. If not, I apologize. Welcome to the channel. I mispronounce everybody's name. And he's a familiar face. I feel like I've seen him in a lot of stuff recently. He was in the movie Bullet Train with Brad Pitt, but he's also Scorpion in the live-action Mortal Kombat movie that came out a couple years ago. And he invites John Wick in and agrees to protect him. And when the Marquis shows up, we get a pretty awesome fight scene involving sumo wrestlers and bows and arrows and the kind of creativity in action that you would expect from the fourth installment of a John Wick movie. And it doesn't disappoint. All the fighting in Japan is very Japanese influenced, and it definitely shows in the choreography and the weapons used. It all feels very authentically Japanese. And on top of that, it's just a lot of fun to watch. These action scenes never disappoint, and it's a great introduction to the kind of action that we will be getting in this movie. But the Marquis isn't just going after John Wick with these stock bodyguards that we've come to expect from these John Wick movies. No, there's actually a surprising amount of side characters in this, which I guess in a 3-hour movie you can afford to have a bunch of side characters. So I'm going to go over them pretty quickly. You have Donnie Yen, who's this blind, formerly retired assassin. He's good friends with John Wick. They go way back as well. And he's kind of coerced out of retirement. He's got a daughter, and if he wants to make sure she's still safe, he'll basically do whatever the Marquis asks of him, which for the purposes of this movie means killing John Wick. And his name is Kane, which I never really put it together until I saw it written down that his name is Kane, C-A-I-N-E, but he's blind and he's got a cane that's a sword, and that's a very comic booky thing to do, John Wick movie, to have your character's name actually be one of the things that he's known for or uses. It's borderline silly, but this movie walks that tightrope between overdone and silly and just awesome, and it just works so well that I can't really fault the movie for that. It's actually kind of clever. But you also have this tracker guy, and he's a new character. He doesn't really know John Wick. He doesn't have a history with John Wick, which is actually kind of refreshing, because over the course of these movies you see all these old friends coming out of the woodwork, and you're like, does John Wick really have that many old friends that never had his back in any of the previous movies, just now coming out of the woodwork to help him when it's convenient for the script? But this tracker guy is not that. He's an entirely new character, and he's been following John Wick since the initial high table contract went out, I think at the end of the second movie, and he's just been keeping tabs on John, getting close enough where if he needed to, he could shoot him, but also keeping track of the money as it's going up and up and up, and the longer John Wick's on the run, the higher it gets, until he sees that the money's good enough and that they're desperate enough, and then he'll pull the trigger. But until then, he's just kind of watching for the fun of it. And last but not least, when it comes to new characters, we have this Harbinger, who's played by Clancy Brown, you know, the voice of Lex Luthor, and he's been in a million things, but he comes in basically as a messenger from the high table. He doesn't really have the authority to do a lot of things except oversee official proceedings like duels. He has the authority to do that, but Clancy Brown is just perfect casting for that. He's a great character actor. I love it whenever he pops up. He has just such a commanding presence and a no-nonsense attitude and a deep, serious voice that you just listen to every word this dude says. But as you might have guessed, despite the Marquis' best efforts, he just cannot seem to manage to kill John Wick and all of his associates. So John and Winston, the Bowery King, they concoct this scheme that there is a way to right the ship. There's a way to fix everything, to get John out from under the table, a way to reinstate Winston as the head of the Continental, to get the Continental rebuilt in New York, and kind of bring back everything to a level of homeostasis. And that is to challenge the Marquis to a duel by the old rules, which is something so ancient that not even the Marquis can refuse, and whoever wins the duel gets basically whatever they want per the agreed upon terms of the duel as they go into it. But John Wick is still technically excommunicado, so he doesn't really have access to these rules, this duel, so he has to go back to the Ruscaroma people that we saw in the last movie and ask for a resealing of his membership, which involves burning his logo into his arm. Again, these John Wick movies are hardcore when it comes to the action and the violence, but also just the pain and suffering that these characters go through, whether it's burning your arm or chopping off a finger. These movies do not pull punches, and it's very refreshing in an action movie nowadays to not do that. Because I don't know about you, but for me, until the year, I don't know, 2022 maybe, I feel like every action movie that was coming out during my lifetime at least always felt kind of safe and PG-13, and they couldn't really push things too far. But I really think that John Wick and its sequels have changed that, and we're now getting a lot more classic rated R action movies. Now action movies have teeth again. They're not afraid to get a little dirty, a little violent, a little rough around the edges. But in order for John Wick to get that crest, the Ruscaroma people aren't too fond of John Wick, especially after what he's been doing to the high table. It's not a great negotiating tactic. Go to the people that you said you wouldn't bother ever again, that you're out of. But they do have a task for him, and that's to kill this really fat German dude who's been a thorn in their side for a while, killed some of their people, and through a very long poker game and subsequent fight scene, he basically kills the fat dude and takes his gold teeth as proof of death. And again, another great fight scene. I don't have time to really go into detail with all the fight scenes because there is so much that happens in this movie, but just believe me, fight scenes are pretty dope. Again, up to the regular standards of the John Wick franchise. That is with one exception. There's one fight scene that I'm like, that isn't quite as good as I want it to be, or I guess I thought it was in the theaters, and it's the nunchuck fight in Japan. And I do credit the filmmakers because they really tried. They really wanted to make the nunchucks look like a feasible weapon in a close quarters combat situation, and it almost works. And I hate to burst anybody's bubble, but nunchucks are just not a very effective weapon in a John Wick type scenario. They're ultimately a training weapon. If you study martial arts, nunchucks are great for learning coordination and skill and muscle memory and speed, and certain muscle groups work in rhythm and training your brain how to move your body and being aware of your surroundings. Nunchucks are great for all of that. For actually fighting people, they're really not your best bet, mostly because the chain forces whatever you hit to bounce back at you. Generally not a good thing, and this movie really tries to make it look realistic, all the crazy traditional nunchuck moves that John Wick clearly knows. But because it's such a momentum-based weapon, it never looks like he's actually hitting the people that he's supposed to be hitting with the nunchuck. Some look more convincing than others, but some shots you can definitely tell, no, he clearly missed, and this follow-through just goes right through where he was supposed to hit. It would have bounced off or redirected or something if he actually hit the person. But no, you see it just go right through. Clearly didn't hit, but you know, it's Hollywood. Just unfortunate that they felt like they had to use nunchucks in the first place. I think pop culture has amplified nunchucks up to this level that it really was never meant to be. And maybe it's Bruce Lee's fault, maybe it's Michelangelo's fault, I don't know. But yeah, the nunchucks were just probably not the best weapon to use in this case. But anyway, back to the story. After he gets the gold tooth from the fat man, he gets the burn, and now he's in a clan. He's recognized by the high table, so he can issue the challenge. And the challenge is this: him and the Marquis are going to duel, with John Wick's second being Winston and the Marquis' second being Kane. The Marquis, being the coward that he is, he actually has Kane be the person firing the gun, so I guess he's really Kane's second in execution, which, you know, that's how those posh French upper crust guys, you know, they don't like to get their hands dirty. They don't like to actually be on the front lines of a challenge, so of course he's going to take the coward's way out. But if John Wick wins, he has no more obligations under the table. He's free. He can just go live his life outside of this crazy world he got wrapped up in again. And with Winston being his second, that means that Winston also has some terms, and his terms are that the Continental be rebuilt, reconsecrated, and Winston will be back as manager just like before. And the Marquis' terms really is just, if he wins, John Wick is dead and Winston's dead with him. Which, you know, seems simple enough, but actually getting to that final duel location, it's gotta be at this church right at dawn. If you're late, you're considered a coward, and they're just gonna kill you anyway for not showing up. So John is trying desperately to get to the church on time. Meanwhile, the Marquis is pulling every string he has to make sure everybody is after John Wick, bumping up the hit on his head. The upper limit that we are actually shown in the movie is $40 million, which compared to the 14 or maybe it was 20 at the start of this movie is quite the jump. So yeah, everybody in France is coming out of the woodwork to try to kill him back to back. He's getting hit by cars, he's getting ambushed in parking lots. He's just so desperate, and you feel it really weighing on him, because even if he does get there, he's going to be so wounded and tired and exhausted. He's probably not going to perform as well as he probably could have at this duel anyway. So it's already very much not stacked in his favor. And this gauntlet of bodies culminates when he's at the steps of this church. And there's like 100 and something steps that he has to climb to get to where he needs to be. And there's the personal security detail of the Marquis blocking John Wick from getting up those steps. And if you want to see the sheer power of will triumph in a movie, watching John climb those steps only to get knocked down a couple different times, and I think at one point he's almost at the top and gets knocked down all the way to the bottom only to have to ascend it again, this is the movie for you. And when John has to ascend those steps for the last time, he's actually not alone. And in a very sweet moment, he partners up with Kane, who is about to kill him in like 5 minutes, but it's not 5 minutes yet. So they can be friends for a while and fight their way up together so that they can, do their business like gentlemen. Oh, and I forgot to mention the tracker. He hasn't gone away during the course of this movie. He's still there, following John Wick through everything, actually saving his life quite a few times, shooting some enemies that might have gotten the drop on him in order for that price point to keep climbing. And now that it's 40 million, he's ready to cash in. And even before he gets to the steps, you have this very extended fight scene in an apartment complex or some kind of building, and you see John just clearing rooms of assassins in a very awesome bird's eye view one shot that just takes you from room to room from a top down angle, and see John just clearing corners, blowing dudes away with this incendiary gun. Dudes just burst into flames and fall to the ground. It's incredible. One shot, dead. But while John is clearing these rooms, the tracker is trying to get closer and closer to John, and when they finally have that moment of altercation, John sees the tracker's dog about to be shot by some other guy and opts to shoot the dude that's about to shoot the dog instead of shooting the tracker or getting away or whatever. He saves the tracker's dog, and it kind of diminishes your motivation to shoot someone in cold blood when they just saved your dog. But I guess does bring the whole franchise full circle, that the whole thing started with the killing of a dog and it ends with the reconciliation that comes from saving another dude's dog from being shot. So yeah, after that, they're kind of friends, and when John ascends the steps and takes care of business, there's the one guy that's like the head of security, and he and the dog just do not have a good relationship together at all. Like, they've been really going at each other throughout the whole movie, and now the tracker gets to end him, and it's very satisfying to watch. But now it's time to talk about the duel. And the duel is probably the most intense sequence in any John Wick movie ever, with the least amount of shots fired, because there's plenty of intense moments throughout this franchise, but usually it's the middle of an action scene with guns or knives or something going on, very fast-paced. This is very meticulous and patient and just lets the tension build, because you have John on one side and Kane on the other side, and they have guns drawn on each other, and they fire, and they, hit in the arm, hit in the side, step closer, shoot again, wounded but not fatally, step closer, shoot again. John goes down. He hits the deck. He's got one in the gut. He's looking finished. He doesn't have much left in him. And now the Marquis takes his moment to gloat. He actually steps in to do what he should have done in the beginning, is stand in front of John Wick and shoot him like a man. But now that John is on the ground crippled, now the Marquis, coward that he is, wants to have the coup de grace. So he takes the gun, loads it, aims it at John's head, but then you realize that John never fired his shot. He was shot and collapsed before he even got off a shot, but now the Marquis is all up in his face, and John just lifts up his gun and says, "Consequences," and shoots him in the face. And I gotta tell you, that is probably the number one most satisfying kill in any of these John Wick movies, because the Marquis is just the worst. He's probably the worst villain, morally speaking, that we've ever seen in a John Wick movie. Probably the most easy to hate. Maybe Theon Greyjoy in the first movie is a close second, with just hateability and really wanted to see this dude dead because he killed John's dog. That's not cool. But this guy, he is just unhinged. He is off his leash. He doesn't really care how many bodies he has to throw at the problem. He is just going to do whatever it takes to finish his mission. To hell with the consequences. And on top of that, he's a sniveling weasel of a man that can't even stand up and do his own duel. So you just don't like him. And when he's got a hole in his forehead at the end of the movie, you really don't feel too bad about it. And even though this was a sort of an orthodox way to finish off a duel, the Marquis is dead, which means John Wick has won. John Wick's terms are honored, that he is no longer beneath the table. Winston's terms are honored. Also, Kane's terms, who I really haven't talked about a lot, but his daughter is free, no longer under any kind of obligation to the table, either as leverage or manipulation. She's off limits. They can't touch her now. Really, it's a happy ending all around. The only downside is, yeah, that bullet hole in John Wick's stomach is looking pretty fatal. He's not looking good. And yes, this is the movie where John dies. He dies at the end of this movie, and he tells Winston to take him home, which is kind of a cryptic message. Again, you don't see John Wick's dead body, but you do see a little funeral with him and the Bowery King looking over him and asking where he is, whether he's in heaven or hell, and they may be leaving it open for John Wick to return, that maybe he's not really dead, maybe he's just recuperating somewhere in the subways of New York. But honestly, for me, I am perfectly happy with this being the final John Wick movie. I really don't want to see any other ones after this. I don't want them to bring John Wick back the character, although I am curious what these other spin-off projects would bring to the John Wick universe. But as far as a main John Wick film with John Wick in the title, I really don't need any more. It started with John Wick and it should end with John Wick. And if that is the case, we have a pretty close to perfect quadrilogy. I don't know how many franchises I can say that about, but 4 movies that are all expert level crafted action movies with compelling storylines, compelling characters, memorable side characters, hateable villains, and top tier level stunt work, choreography, and action. As a fan of this franchise, as a fan of movies, this really was the perfect way to end the franchise. Now, does it make it my personal favorite John Wick movie? Not really. I think I still have a lot more fun with John Wick 3. I think what hinders John Wick 4 in the pure enjoyment level is how serious it takes itself, because again, this is the end of a franchise. This is the last one, so it should take itself more seriously. The stakes should be higher. Everything should be more intense, which it is, and it's perfect for this movie. It's just, for me personally, if I were to pop one in just at random, it would probably be number 3. It's just more fun. But I'm turning over to you guys. What do you think about John Wick 4, and which one is your favorite John Wick movie? Whatever you think, let me know in the comments, and if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content, and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. And as always, I'm Colby, this is my Nerdy Talk, and I'll see you in the next video.